of SB4.
All right, welcome everyone. We are here for oral argument, and I'm sorry, my computer seems to shut itself off really fast. We're here for oral argument on several matters, so we need to use our time efficiently, and I want to work through and get you rulings on all these issues to the extent I can after argument today. So what I'd like to do first is talk about the motion to compel. And I have some points that I'd like you each to focus on from my notes. And then we will go through the Rule 26D statements one at a time after that. And then we are going to be talking about appointing a special master for discovery disputes going forward. But we'll get to that at the end. So first, let's talk about the motion to compel. For STK, whose motion this is, I will say that I'd first like you to talk about the sort of disconnect between the request for reports, disclosures, and presentations versus the more broad request for communications, which is something the response identified. Second, I'd like you to talk about what, if any, narrowing you did to that request following our conference in February of 26. And lastly, I'd like you to talk to me about the relevance of post-termination communications, because that is an area where the response identified a concern about having to disclose everything with their attorneys in litigation, which is typically not something I'd ask a party to do, and whether or not we can narrow the scope to pre-termination communications or pre-litigation communications to avoid the burden that would place on them. For BLVD's counsel, I'd like you to talk about, number one, the focus in your response seems to be on a relevance objection, which leads me to believe there are communications that have been withheld on a basis other than privilege, but it's not clear to me whether or not you've searched for communications and investor presentations outside of the two that were disclosed from December and April. And so I'd like to know, have you searched for other documents within any relevant time period? And if so, what are the volume of those documents? And of that portion, are there documents that are not subject to privilege? And so that your objection is really only on relevance. And that's really to the pre-termination communications. And I'm focusing in on that, what I think is the key time frame from when the dispute arose through to the point of when litigation was filed. And also, I'd like you to address the points made in the reply. They pointed to quite a few communications that were apparently disclosed by SB4 that indicate there were meetings and conversations happening between BLVD and its investors, and at least sometime during March of 2025. So that's something I'd like you to address as well if you weren't already planning to talk about it. So we'll start. I don't know who's arguing for STK today.
It's me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm switching you guys. I'm thinking in my head plaintiff versus defendant and which table you're sitting at. I apologize for that. So you don't have to stand if you don't want to. It's okay to stay seated if wherever you're most comfortable. If you want to come to the podium, you can, but being seated is fine. Just make sure that you're speaking into a microphone so that the FTR is clearly picking up the argument.
Your Honor, so we aren't walking, so I'm not walking up and back from the podium. I'd like to stand here if that's okay with you. And
that's perfectly fine.
I sound pretty loud, so I must be talking into the mic. Robert Hill for STK Scottsdale LLC. Regarding your question specifically, you asked about the disconnect between the RFP that's asking for reports and other financial information and what we've requested. And so I want to clarify, STK is requesting as part of this motion to compel, pursuant to its RFP, those reports and other financial statements shared with the Blvd investors by Blvd during the relevant period. And I will get to that shortly. And then pursuant to Blvd's obligations under Rule 26.1 and other RFPs that I apologize were not included in our papers, STK is entitled to relevant documents, including communications with its investors that relate to this dispute. And as you flagged, there must be more than two. The Blvd investors show up in a meeting on March 10th.
And I apologize for interrupting, but just to clarify, when you say, sorry, these weren't in our papers, are you saying the communications were requested, just not an RFP number 5?
That's correct.
Okay.
STK made a general request for documents and communications relevant to this dispute. I think it was RFP 1, but we included that as part of our formal document requests, and then also 26.1 generally makes that an obligation of the parties. You asked about narrowing the scope of production, and during our meet and confers after the 26D, after this issue was raised by STK in a 26D, there were discussions about what would be produced. Blvd said it would consider it, and then we moved on. And so there was not, during the time, a specific narrowing of the dispute during the meet and confer.
Well, and I apologize. I always tell you what I want you to talk about, and then I still interrupt. And it's really just because I'm afraid I'm going to forget to ask a particular question when it comes up. So thank you for indulging the interruptions. But so what I'm really wanting to understand is your motion is still asking for documents going all the way back to January, I think, of 2018. It might be 19, but back several years, when the focus of this case is really when this dispute arose about closing the rooftop. And so why is the request, what is the relevance to 2018, 2019, 2020?
Sure. So a few responses to that, Your Honor. Blvd's complaint is extremely wide-ranging. It alleges that STK kind of at all times did not manage the restaurant properly. And so to the extent Blvd was speaking with its investors and saying, we're doing great, we're not doing great, we're really pleased with our partnership with STK, all the way back through to the signing of the management agreement in 2019, those communications would be relevant. Specifically, and we put this in our reply, we include this in our reply, Blvd in its response talks about a 2022 settlement agreement that related to some tax credits during COVID.